I never thought my sister-in-law would try to drug me at her wedding, at least not in my wildest imagination. But as I stood there, watching her smug face while she raised a glass to toast her perfect day, it felt like everything I knew about my marriage, my family fee, and even myself was being torn apart. It wasn't supposed to be this way. We had just celebrated our 5th wedding anniversary. Ben, my husband, had always been my rock, strong, reliable, and caring. We had built a life together, full of laughter, shared dreams, and the comfort of knowing we were there for each other. But everything changed at Kelly's wedding. What started as a light-hearted family gathering quickly became the nightmare that changed everything. I didn't even know what hit me. When I returned to my seat after helping an elderly guest with her purse, the glass I had left on the table was in Ben's hand. I thought nothing of it at first. He must have been thirsty, I figured. It wasn't until much later that I learned what had happened. Ben had been poisoned. Kelly's prank had gone terribly wrong. And that's when it all started. The accusations, the blame, the betrayal. Ben almost died, and now Kelly was suing us, claiming we ruined her wedding. My in-laws, ever the peacemakers, demanded we let it go. Let her off the hook, they said. She's family, they said. But family doesn't try to destroy you. Family doesn't poison you and then act like it was just a joke. I thought my life would be different after I married Ben, but I never imagined it would unravel this way. And as I sit here, thinking about the wreckage she caused, I realize I'm no longer the woman who blindly believed in her in-laws. I've become someone new, a woman who's learned the hard way that blood isn't always thicker than water. I've always been the type of person to believe in family. The kind of person who thinks every Thanksgiving dinner should be filled with laughter, no empty chairs, and no grudges lingering in the air. I guess that's why, when I met Ben, I immediately connected with the idea of having a future with him. He wasn't perfect, but he was perfect for me. He was strong, grounded, and had this way of making me feel like the center of his world. Ben and I had been dating for 3 years before we decided to get married. I was 27, and I knew he was the one. Ben had always been open with me about his life, his parents, his childhood, his sister Kelly. He told me about their close relationship, how they had grown up sharing everything, how they had always been there for each other. It all sounded so sweet, so picture perfect. I could picture us becoming part of that. I was ready to be part of his world, and I thought they were ready to accept me into theirs. But when I met Kelly, it wasn't what I expected. Ben had warned me about her, a little spoiled, a little dramatic, a little too involved in his life for comfort, but I thought it would be fine. I thought that after a few visits she'd warm up to me. After all, she was his sister, right? I'd never expected her to feel threatened by me, but from the moment I met Kelly, it was like I'd stepped into a battle zone. At first, it was small things, comments about how Ben had changed since meeting me, how he used to be more available to her, how they'd always been closer before I came along. But it wasn't just words. Kelly would insert herself into every family event, making sure that Ben and I weren't left alone for too long. At dinners, she'd talk about their childhood memories in a way that made it sound like I was the outsider, not her. It was almost as if she wanted to erase me from their shared history. And Ben, he would just sit there, silent, squeezing my hand under the table but saying nothing to defend me. It was as though he didn't see the subtle manipulation taking place, or maybe he just didn't want to. It didn't help that Kelly had a knack for making everything feel like a competition. Whenever she posted old photos of her and Ben, pictures from family vacations, birthdays, high school, she'd crop me out. I'd try to ignore it, tell myself it wasn't a big deal, but it stung. Each cropped photo, each little jab felt like a reminder that I wasn't truly welcome in her world. And Ben? He told me to ignore it. She's nostalgic, he said. She'll get over it. But the tension kept building. Then Kelly graduated college and moved back to town, and that's when things really took a turn. She started posting more photos, making sure to leave me out of any memory that included her and Ben. It felt intentional, as if she was rewriting their history to exclude me. And Ben? He still didn't say anything. He told me to ignore her, but that didn't make it any easier. She was trying to erase me, and he didn't even see it. I kept quiet. I didn't want to make waves. I wanted to fit in, to be accepted. But every comment, every photo, every cold interaction with Kelly chipped away at my confidence. The longer I stayed quiet, the harder it became to find my place in Ben's family. Things started to shift when Kelly moved back for good. She got a job at a marketing firm, which meant she was in town more often, and that meant more visits to their parents' house, more subtle jabs at me, and more distance between Ben and me. I could feel the tension growing, but Ben didn't see it. He'd reassure me, saying it was just her way of being dramatic, but the more I tried to ignore it, the more it seemed like Kelly was trying to make her presence known in every part of my life. The most frustrating part was how she would weave herself into every family event. At birthday parties, she'd sit next to Ben, whispering old inside jokes, talking about things I didn't know or didn't understand. And it wasn't just the reminiscing. She'd go out of her way to make me feel like I didn't belong. During family dinners, she'd turn to me with a smile that never quite reached her eyes and make passive-aggressive comments like, "It's nice to see Ben has someone to keep him busy these days." She'd make it sound so innocent, but I could hear the bite behind it. It was like she wanted me to know that I wasn't a part of their world, and that hurt more than I wanted to admit. I kept waiting for Ben to say something, to stand up for me, to acknowledge the discomfort Kelly was causing. But he didn't. He would squeeze my hand under the table, offering that familiar, comforting gesture, but never confronting Kelly. And the more it happened, the more I started questioning everything. Was he so used to her behavior that he didn't even notice how toxic it was? Was I just overreacting? Was I being paranoid? There were moments when I'd ask him about it. "Ben, don't you see what's going on?" I'd ask, my voice shaking with frustration. But every time he'd brush it off. "She's just a little nostalgic. She'll get over it." But she never did. In fact, the comments got worse. She started posting more photos of her and Ben, photos where I wasn't even in the frame, pictures from their childhood, from family vacations, and even from his birthday parties. Each one was cropped to exclude me. I tried to ignore it, tried to convince myself that it was just her being childish, but it stung every time. It was like I was invisible to her, and Ben didn't even see it. I couldn't take it anymore. The silent treatment, the isolation, the constant undermining of my place in Ben's life. I knew it was building to something. I didn't know when or how, but I could feel the storm coming, and I was helpless to stop it. Things took a turn the day Kelly announced her engagement. It wasn't the announcement itself that threw me, it was the way she did it. It was at a family dinner, and she showed up wearing that smug smile, holding up her hand to show the ring. Everyone congratulated her, everyone except me. When she got to me, she didn't even offer a real smile. "Some people just get lucky with love," she said, and I could feel the sting of her words. She was looking directly at me when she said it, making it clear that her little comment was for my benefit. Ben didn't notice, or if he did, he didn't say anything. He just squeezed my hand under the table again and tried to change the subject. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her why she was so determined to make me feel small, to make me feel like I was intruding on her perfect little world. But I didn't. Instead, I forced a smile, congratulated her, and tried to hold it together. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I'd never been good at confrontation. I wasn't the type to cause a scene, but I felt like I was slowly being pushed out of my own life, and I didn't know how much longer I could pretend that everything was fine. The day of Kelly's wedding was supposed to be a celebration. Everyone was excited, the family was buzzing with energy, and I was trying to push down the growing sense of dread that seemed to linger in the pit of my stomach. I told myself I was overreacting, that everything would be fine. After all, it was her big day, and I wanted to support Ben, be there for him and for Kelly, even if things between us were strained. The wedding venue was picturesque, a barn that had been converted into an event space, rustic yet elegant. But as soon as I stepped inside, I felt the shift in the air. Kelly had put me at a table far away from the head table, as far from the center of attention as possible. I didn't mind at first. I tried to convince myself it didn't matter, but the more I sat there, the more the subtle jabs, the little comments, and the coldness from her seemed to consume the room. She wasn't even looking at me. It was as if I didn't exist. Ben was a groomsman, so he was caught up in the post-ceremony photos, chatting with relatives and friends. I was left alone, sitting at a table with some of Ben's cousins, trying to make small talk, trying to keep the anxiety at bay. It wasn't working. Every time I caught sight of Kelly, I felt that same coldness emanating from her. It was as if she were actively trying to erase me from the event. I kept my head down, trying to focus on anything other than the feeling that I was the unwelcome guest at my own family's celebration. When Ben finally came over to sit with me, I tried to shake off the unease. We ate appetizers and chatted with his cousins, but I couldn't help but notice Kelly in the background, laughing, joking, acting like everything was perfect. It was hard to keep up the facade. I didn't drink much. I had to work an early shift the next morning at the hospital, so I went up to the bar, got a glass of lemonade, and brought it back to my seat. It wasn't long before something strange happened. A few minutes after I sat down, I got up to help an elderly guest who had dropped her purse. While I was helping her, my drink was left on the table. I didn't think much of it, but when I came back, I found Ben sitting in my seat, holding my glass. I didn't think it was anything to be concerned about at first. He was thirsty, I thought. He finished what was left and put the glass back on the table. But within the next 30 minutes, something felt off. Ben started sweating. His face became clammy, his jaw tight, and his pupils were dilated. His whole body was shaking. I asked him if he was okay. He said he felt hot, but it wasn't hot in the venue. There was air conditioning after all. But when I touched his hand, it was cold, damp, and his pulse was racing. I knew what was happening. I worked in the ER, and I recognized the signs of an overdose. My heart dropped into my stomach. I grabbed Ben, trying to hold him up, but his legs gave out. He collapsed onto the gravel outside, trembling uncontrollably. I felt helpless. Mark, one of Ben's cousins, saw what was happening and rushed to help. We managed to get Ben outside, and Mark ran inside to get help. I stayed with Ben, trying to comfort him as best I could, but he was barely conscious, barely able to speak. Someone called 911. The ambulance arrived within 15 minutes, and they rushed Ben to the hospital. I stayed by his side the whole time, barely able to process what was happening. The entire wedding, Kelly's big day, was unfolding without anyone even noticing. No one was aware of the emergency in the parking lot, not even the guests who were still inside, laughing, dancing, and celebrating. At the hospital, they took Ben straight to the ER. Blood work was done. His heart rate was dangerously high. He was hooked up to fluids, monitors, and given something to calm him down. A doctor came in after an hour and confirmed that there were traces of MDMA, ecstasy, in Ben's system. I couldn't understand it. He hadn't taken anything intentionally. Neither of us had. But when the doctor asked if Ben had taken it on purpose, he shook his head, and I did the same. It was an accidental overdose. That's when I found out. It wasn't until the second day, after Ben had been released, that I received a text from Kelly. It was long, venomous, and cruel. She blamed me for ruining her wedding, saying I had spiked my own drink to get attention. She accused me of being jealous of her happiness. She even went so far as to say that everyone at the wedding could see through my act. I showed Ben the text. He stared at it for a long time, eyes unfocused, before turning away. His silence said everything. I thought the worst of it was over, but it was just the beginning. The shock of what had happened at the wedding and the aftermath of Ben's hospitalization lingered like a dark cloud over everything. I couldn't understand how we had gone from celebrating Kelly's wedding to fighting for Ben's life in the hospital. It felt like everything had happened in a blur, but now, as I sat beside Ben's hospital bed, I was forced to confront the reality of what we were facing. Ben wasn't the same. He was physically exhausted, and emotionally, he was distant. His usual warmth was replaced by a coldness that sent a shiver down my spine. The man I had married, the man I knew so well, was slipping away, and I couldn't figure out how to pull him back. He couldn't sleep. His body was trembling with anxiety. The doctor said it was a normal reaction after such an intense experience, but it didn't feel normal. It felt wrong, and I was terrified. As much as I wanted to comfort him, I didn't know how. I kept asking if he was okay, if there was anything I could do to help, but he kept pushing me away. It wasn't just the physical effects of the overdose, it was the emotional weight of everything that had happened. His sister, the woman he had grown up with, had tried to poison me, and now she was accusing me of being the one to ruin everything. How could I even begin to explain what had happened? How could I make him see that this wasn't my fault? At first, I didn't want to believe Kelly could do something so malicious. I kept telling myself it was just a mistake, that maybe she had never intended for things to go this far. But then the text she sent me, the blame, the insults, the accusation that I had somehow orchestrated this all for attention, left no room for doubt. Kelly had planned this, and she had no remorse. I showed Ben the text, and when I saw the pain in his eyes, I knew we were on different paths. He didn't know what to believe anymore. Was his sister capable of something like this? Could I ever forgive her for what she'd done? As the days went by, the emotional toll of the incident weighed on both of us. Ben wasn't sleeping. He would wake up in the middle of the night, shaking, drenched in sweat, as if the memory of what had happened at the wedding had come rushing back to him. I felt helpless. How could I help him when it felt like I was losing him? I wanted to be strong for him, but how could I be when I was just as broken? I thought about everything Kelly had done, everything she'd said. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how manipulative she had been, how she had twisted every situation to make herself the victim, to make me feel like an intruder. I had been so focused on trying to fit into Ben's world, to make his family accept me, that I had overlooked the truth. Kelly didn't want me in her life. She didn't want me with Ben, and she was willing to go to any lengths to push me out. Ben's family didn't make things any easier. His mother called the day after the wedding, asking if we were okay. She said that Kelly had made a mistake, that she felt terrible about what had happened. But when Ben asked if Kelly would face any consequences, his mother was quiet. She didn't want to confront the truth. Instead, she told him to move on because family is family. That's when I realized it wasn't just Kelly who was trying to undermine me. It was his entire family. They expected me to just forgive and forget, to sweep everything under the rug because Kelly was family. But how could I? How could I forgive someone who had tried to destroy me, who had put my husband's life at risk just to get back at me for existing in her world? There was no way to fix this, and there was no way to go back to the way things were. Ben's family was clearly on Kelly's side, and as much as Ben wanted to believe the best in his sister, the evidence was undeniable. She had tried to poison me. That wasn't something I could ignore, something I could sweep away with a simple apology. And then came the lawsuit. Kelly, feeling the weight of what had happened, had the audacity to blame us for ruining her wedding. She sued us for emotional distress, claiming we had destroyed her happiness and her marriage. My stomach twisted when I heard about the lawsuit. Kelly wasn't sorry. She wasn't apologizing for what she did. She was playing the victim, making us the villains, and I couldn't let that happen. We filed our own lawsuit, with Ben taking the lead. We didn't have much of a choice. The medical bills were piling up, and Ben's emotional and physical health were still hanging in the balance. Our lawyer said it would be difficult to press criminal charges against Kelly, but a civil lawsuit could hold her accountable for the harm she'd caused. And that's exactly what we did. The lawsuit wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of what turned into an emotional and familial battle that I had never anticipated. The days after we filed the lawsuit were filled with tension, uncertainty, and growing hostility. It felt like the world was closing in on me. Kelly wasn't the only one coming after us. Ben's family was too. And suddenly the family I had once been so eager to fit into now felt like a battlefield. The support we thought we would have from them didn't exist. Instead, Ben and I were isolated, facing backlash from people who should have been on our side. It started with the phone calls. Ben's mother reached out first. Her voice, as usual, was calm but heavy with disapproval. She didn't understand why we were pursuing this. She said that Kelly had made a mistake, a big one, but that wasn't a reason to ruin her life. "She's your sister," she reminded Ben. "She's family. Don't let this destroy what you have with her." Ben remained silent on the other end of the phone. I could hear the strain in his voice as he finally spoke. "Mom, she poisoned me. I almost died because of her." His voice cracked slightly, betraying the pain he was trying to suppress. But his mother didn't relent. "She didn't mean to hurt you. It was a mistake. A stupid prank gone wrong. You can't keep dragging this out, Ben. It's tearing the family apart." I watched Ben as he listened to his mother, his face a mask of frustration and sorrow. It wasn't just Kelly anymore. It was his entire family demanding that he forgive her, forgive them, and pretend like nothing had happened. As if the danger, the betrayal, could be swept under the rug for the sake of family unity. The next day, Ben's father called. The conversation was eerily similar to the one with his mother, pleading for Ben to let it go. They didn't want a lawsuit to tear apart their family. And when Ben asked if Kelly was going to face any consequences for what she had done, his father brushed it off. "It's not about punishment," he said, his voice thick with the weight of denial. "It's about healing, and family always heals." It felt like a slap in the face. Every call, every plea from Ben's family was making me feel more and more like the enemy. It wasn't just Kelly anymore. It was all of them, asking us to just forget what happened, to forgive the unthinkable, and to pretend like we were all one big, happy family again. But there was no going back, not after what Kelly had done, not after how they had all stood by her. But the pressure didn't stop there. Word of the lawsuit spread quickly. Family members began to pick sides. Ben's cousins, who had always seemed neutral, suddenly came out of the woodwork, backing Kelly's side of the story. They didn't believe she had done anything wrong. They said we were overreacting, that it wasn't a big deal. One of Ben's cousins even sent us a message saying that Kelly was just being dramatic and that we should drop the lawsuit. They told Ben he was choosing me over his own sister and that this was all blown out of proportion. I tried to ignore it. I tried to tell myself that we had made the right decision. But with every call, every message, and every text that came in supporting Kelly's side, I began to feel like we were fighting an uphill battle with no end in sight. It wasn't just Kelly who had tried to poison me. It was her entire family, all of them backing her, making excuses for her actions, and questioning our right to seek justice. But it wasn't just the family's reaction that was overwhelming. It was the constant pressure. Kelly's social media posts became more frequent and pointed. She didn't mention the lawsuit directly, but the vague quotes she posted about fake people and disloyalty were clearly aimed at us. She posted old pictures of her and Ben from their childhood, adding captions about how family used to mean something and how things had changed for the worse. She posted photos of their family vacations with Ben and her smiling together, leaving me out of the frame, as if to further erase me from the picture. And then there were the anonymous messages. People I didn't know started following me on Instagram. They commented on my posts, calling me names and accusing me of tearing apart a family over a simple mistake. They said I was causing drama for attention, that I was jealous of Kelly and her happiness. I tried to ignore them, but it was hard. I had spent my entire life trying to fit in with Ben's family, and now everything I had built with him was being torn apart by people who barely knew me. The most unsettling part was when Tom, Kelly's husband, showed up at our house. He didn't knock on the door. He just sat in his car across the street for 2 hours, staring at our house. I called Ben, and he immediately called Tom, telling him to leave. Tom drove away without a word. The next day, I started receiving text messages from unknown numbers, messages telling me to leave Ben, that I wasn't welcome in their family. They said I was the problem, that I was poisoning Ben's relationships with everyone. I blocked the numbers, but new ones kept appearing. It felt like I couldn't escape it. Then, a few weeks later, something even more disturbing happened. Kelly followed me to work one morning. I didn't realize she was behind me until I pulled into the hospital parking lot. She parked a few spaces away from me, just sat there, staring at me. I went inside, trying to shake off the unease, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Why was she following me? What did she want? It was like she was trying to intimidate me, to make me feel like I had no escape from her and her family's manipulation. I started to feel like I was losing control. This wasn't just about the lawsuit anymore. This was about my safety, my mental health, and my future with Ben. I was constantly on edge, always looking over my shoulder, wondering when the next attack would come. Kelly had made it clear that she wasn't going to stop until she had destroyed me, and with the full backing of her family, it felt like there was no way out. I reached my breaking point after everything had spiraled out of control. The phone calls, the text messages, the endless pressure from Ben's family. It all became too much. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of anger, guilt, and helplessness. Every day felt like an emotional battlefield, and I was losing the fight. I thought that once we filed the lawsuit, things would start to settle down. But instead, everything seemed to intensify. It felt like Kelly and her family were doing everything in their power to make us regret standing up for ourselves. The more we fought, the more they pushed back. It wasn't just about the lawsuit anymore, it was about survival, and I wasn't sure how much more I could take. Ben was distant, and I couldn't blame him. How could I expect him to carry the weight of all this? He was torn between his family and me, between the woman he had married and the sister who had nearly killed me. I watched him every day, knowing he was hurting, knowing he was just as broken as I was, but there was nothing I could do. The more I tried to support him, the more he withdrew. It was like he couldn't face me anymore, couldn't face the truth of what had happened. His silence was suffocating, and I didn't know how to break through it. I felt like a stranger in my own home. Ben had become a shadow of the man I had married. He wasn't the person I had fallen in love with. He wasn't the person who used to hold me close and tell me everything would be okay. Now, when I reached out to him, he pulled away. When I tried to talk, he became quiet and distant. It felt like we were living in two different worlds, one where I was fighting for our marriage, and another where Ben was struggling to come to terms with everything that had happened. The worst part was the loneliness. I had always been a people person, someone who loved being around family, being part of a community. But now I felt more isolated than I ever had before. Kelly had made sure of that, and so had Ben's family. They had taken sides, and I wasn't on theirs. I was the outsider now, the enemy. They didn't understand what I had been through, what I was still going through. They didn't care. All they cared about was their own comfort, their own peace. They wanted to move on. They wanted to pretend that nothing had happened, that Kelly's actions could just be erased with a simple apology. But I couldn't forget. I couldn't forget what Kelly had done to me. I couldn't forget how she had tried to destroy my life, how she had poisoned the man I loved. And I couldn't forget how Ben had stood by and let it happen. I had to remind myself that I wasn't crazy, that what Kelly had done was unforgivable. And yet there was still a part of me that kept asking if I had done something wrong, if I had somehow caused all of this. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I had done nothing wrong. I had been a good wife. I had loved Ben with everything I had. I had supported him through everything, through the ups and downs. But in the end, it wasn't enough. It never had been. It wasn't enough to stop Kelly from trying to tear us apart. And it wasn't enough to make Ben see what was really happening. I felt like I was losing him. Every day, every argument, every silent moment between us. It was like we were slipping further and further away from each other. I wanted to scream at him, to make him see the truth, to make him understand that I couldn't do this anymore. But I couldn't. I couldn't bring myself to force him to choose between me and his family. I couldn't make him see that his silence was killing us both. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, something inside me shifted. I realized that I couldn't keep waiting for Ben to come back to me, for things to go back to the way they were. I couldn't keep hoping that Kelly would somehow come to her senses and apologize for what she had done. I had to take control of my own life. I had to stop letting this toxic situation dictate my every move, my every thought. I wasn't going to let Ben's family break me. I wasn't going to let Kelly or anyone else make me feel small anymore. I had been strong enough to survive what happened at the wedding. I had been strong enough to survive Ben's silence, to survive the constant emotional manipulation from his family. I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for, but the pain of it all was still there, simmering just beneath the surface. I couldn't escape it. The feeling of betrayal, of being utterly alone, consumed me. I thought back to our wedding day, to the dreams we had shared, and I wondered how it had all gone so wrong. How had the life I had built with Ben turned into a battlefield? How had I let myself get so caught up in trying to please everyone else that I had forgotten to protect myself? I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. I couldn't keep pretending that our marriage was something it wasn't. Something was broken, and I didn't know if it could ever be fixed. The shift didn't come with a scream or a dramatic confrontation. It came quietly, on an ordinary evening, when the truth finally stopped being something I felt and became something we could prove. A week after Kelly followed me to work, Ben received a call from an unfamiliar number. He almost didn't answer. Lately, every unknown call felt like another attack waiting to happen, but something made him press accept and put it on speaker. The voice on the other end was hesitant, careful. A man introduced himself as a waiter from the wedding venue. He said he'd been thinking about what happened that night. He said he couldn't stop replaying it in his head. My stomach tightened as he spoke. He told us he had seen Kelly and one of her bridesmaids standing near our table during the reception. He said they were laughing, leaning in close like they were sharing a secret. He watched the bridesmaid pull a small bottle from her purse and pour something into a glass. He said Kelly pointed at the glass. He couldn't hear what she said, but the gesture was clear. Then they walked away. At the time, he thought it was a harmless prank. Weddings were full of stupid jokes, he said. But then he saw the ambulance lights. He heard later what happened to Ben, and the guilt had been eating at him ever since. When the call ended, the house was silent. Ben didn't move. He just stared at the wall like it might give him answers he'd been avoiding. I watched his face change, not into anger, not yet, but into something harder, something final. That was the moment he stopped protecting the version of his sister he wanted to believe in. That night, Ben called Kelly. I sat beside him, my hands clenched in my lap, listening. Kelly cried immediately. She didn't deny it. She said it was supposed to be a joke. She said she only wanted to see me embarrass myself on the dance floor. She said she never thought Ben would drink it. She kept repeating the same words over and over. I didn't mean for this to happen. But intent didn't erase outcome. And it didn't erase the image of Ben shaking on the gravel, barely conscious, his life hanging by a thread because she wanted a laugh. Ben hung up on her mid-sob. For the first time since the wedding, he looked at me and really saw me. Not as the buffer between him and his family, not as the reason everything had gone wrong, but as the woman who had stood by him while he nearly died, the woman who had been blamed, harassed, followed, and silenced. "I'm done," he said quietly. "I'm done pretending this is something it's not." From that point on, everything changed, not around us, but inside us. When his parents called again, asking when he was going to fix this, he didn't argue. He didn't explain. He told them the truth, that his sister had poisoned him, that it wasn't an accident, that intent didn't matter anymore, and that he wasn't going to sacrifice his marriage to protect a lie. When his mother tried to minimize it, he ended the call. We contacted our lawyer again, this time with the waiter's testimony. She listened carefully, then smiled in a way that told me something important had shifted. "This," she said, "is accountability." Not long after, Kelly filed a countersuit. She claimed emotional distress. She said our lawsuit had destroyed her mental health. She said she couldn't work, couldn't leave her apartment, couldn't function. I remember reading the filing and feeling something unexpected. Calm, because for the first time, I knew the truth wasn't just something we carried alone. The turning point wasn't just about evidence or legal leverage. It was about clarity, about finally understanding that I wasn't imagining things, that I hadn't overreacted, that the discomfort I'd felt for years hadn't been insecurity, it had been instinct. I stopped trying to be liked. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped absorbing blame that was never mine to carry. Ben changed too. He stopped apologizing for choosing me. He stopped chasing approval from people who had already decided whose side they were on. He started sleeping more, speaking more, standing taller. And for the first time since the wedding, I felt something that had been missing for months. Power. Not the loud kind, not revenge. Just the steady, grounded certainty that I knew who I was, and that I was done being silent. The shift didn't come with a scream or a dramatic confrontation. It came quietly, on an ordinary evening, when the truth finally stopped being something I felt and became something we could prove. A week after Kelly followed me to work, Ben received a call from an unfamiliar number. He almost didn't answer. Lately, every unknown call felt like another attack waiting to happen, but something made him press accept and put it on speaker. The voice on the other end was hesitant, careful. A man introduced himself as a waiter from the wedding venue. He said he'd been thinking about what happened that night. He said he couldn't stop replaying it in his head. My stomach tightened as he spoke. He told us he had seen Kelly and one of her bridesmaids standing near our table during the reception. He said they were laughing, leaning in close like they were sharing a secret. He watched the bridesmaid pull a small bottle from her purse and pour something into a glass. He said Kelly pointed at the glass. He couldn't hear what she said, but the gesture was clear. Then they walked away. At the time, he thought it was a harmless prank. Weddings were full of stupid jokes, he said. But then he saw the ambulance lights. He heard later what happened to Ben, and the guilt had been eating at him ever since. When the call ended, the house was silent. Ben didn't move. He just stared at the wall, like it might give him answers he'd been avoiding. I watched his face change, not into anger, not yet, but into something harder, something final. That was the moment he stopped protecting the version of his sister he wanted to believe in. That night, Ben called Kelly. I sat beside him, my hands clenched in my lap, listening. Kelly cried immediately. She didn't deny it. She said it was supposed to be a joke. She said she only wanted to see me embarrass myself on the dance floor. She said she never thought Ben would drink it. She kept repeating the same words over and over. I didn't mean for this to happen, but intent didn't erase outcome. And it didn't erase the image of Ben shaking on the gravel, barely conscious, his life hanging by a thread because she wanted a laugh. Ben hung up on her mid-sob. For the first time since the wedding, he looked at me and really saw me. Not as the buffer between him and his family, not as the reason everything had gone wrong, but as the woman who had stood by him while he nearly died, the woman who had been blamed, harassed, followed, and silenced. "I'm done," he said quietly. "I'm done pretending this is something it's not." From that point on, everything changed, not around us, but inside us. When his parents called again, asking when he was going to fix this, he didn't argue. He didn't explain. He told them the truth, that his sister had poisoned him, that it wasn't an accident, that intent didn't matter anymore, and that he wasn't going to sacrifice his marriage to protect a lie. When his mother tried to minimize it, he ended the call. We contacted our lawyer again, this time with the waiter's testimony. She listened carefully, then smiled in a way that told me something important had shifted. This, she said, is accountability. Not long after, Kelly filed a countersuit. She claimed emotional distress. She said our lawsuit had destroyed her mental health. She said she couldn't work, couldn't leave her apartment, couldn't function. I remember reading the filing and feeling something unexpected. Calm. Because for the first time, I knew the truth wasn't just something we carried alone. The turning point wasn't just about evidence or legal leverage. It was about clarity, about finally understanding that I wasn't imagining things, that I hadn't overreacted, that the discomfort I'd felt for years hadn't been insecurity. It had been instinct. I stopped trying to be liked. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped absorbing blame that was never mine to carry. Ben changed too. He stopped apologizing for choosing me. He stopped chasing approval from people who had already decided whose side they were on. He started sleeping more, speaking more, standing taller. And for the first time since the wedding, I felt something that had been missing for months. Power. Not the loud kind, not revenge. Just the steady, grounded certainty that I knew who I was and that I was done being silent. Months passed after the trial, and though the courtroom drama had subsided, the emotional scars remained. Kelly's countersuit was dismissed, and we were left with the quiet aftermath of everything that had happened. Ben and I were no longer the same people we had been before the wedding. We couldn't be. The betrayal, the manipulation, it had changed the fabric of our relationship, our family, and our sense of security. But there was a certain peace that came with knowing the truth was out. Kelly's attempts to distort the narrative, to make herself the victim, couldn't change what had happened. She couldn't erase the fact that she had poisoned her brother, that she had tried to destroy me for no reason other than her own jealousy and insecurity. The family had been fractured beyond repair, and no amount of pretending could undo the damage she had caused. For the first time, I realized that the family I had tried so desperately to fit into wasn't the one I had imagined. It wasn't a place where love and loyalty were unconditional. It was a place of manipulation, hidden resentments, and loyalty to toxic behavior. And while it was painful to accept, I understood that I couldn't force myself into a place that didn't want me. I couldn't keep fighting for acceptance from people who were willing to choose sides based on blood rather than the truth. Ben, for his part, was quieter. He had lost more than just his sister. He had lost his ideal of family, the one he had been so eager to protect. But slowly he began to heal. I watched him start to regain his sense of self, to reclaim the parts of him that had been buried under years of pleasing everyone else. He was angry. He was hurt. But he was also stronger than I had ever seen him. The truth had set us both free, even if the road to healing was long. As for me, I learned a hard but valuable lesson in all of this. Standing up for myself was not only necessary, it was essential for my well-being. I couldn't keep sacrificing my happiness for the sake of keeping peace with people who didn't care about me. I couldn't continue to let Kelly or anyone else dictate my self-worth. It wasn't about revenge or getting back at anyone. It was about reclaiming my life, my peace, and my future. I learned to put myself first, something I had never done before. I realized that true strength comes not from silence or sacrifice, but from knowing your worth and having the courage to protect it. Ben and I, though changed, were still together. We didn't know what the future held, but we had learned to take things one day at a time. We had faced the hardest test of our relationship and had come out the other side. We weren't perfect, but we had each other, and that was enough. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. I had learned to trust myself, to trust my instincts, and to trust that, in the end, the truth would always find its way to the surface. And that was the lesson. The truth, no matter how painful, no matter how much it threatens to tear everything apart, will always set you free. It may leave scars, but it will also give you the strength to rebuild.